My cousin Rachel demanded that I give her my house as a wedding gift, and she said it like it was already decided. She announced her engagement to Brian at Thanksgiving dinner, smiled at everyone, and then turned to me and said she already knew what my gift would be. I honestly thought she meant the crystal vases I always give for weddings, but then she said no, I'd be giving them my house. Not helping with money, not contributing to a deposit, but my actual house that I bought 2 years ago after saving for 10 years. She said it in front of about 30 relatives like it was completely normal. I laughed at first because I thought she was joking, but she wasn't. She said I was single with no kids, so I didn't really need a 3-bedroom house while they were starting a family and deserved a proper home. She actually said the word deserved while sitting in my dining room eating the food I had cooked. Her mom, my Aunt Helen, nodded like this was a reasonable thing to say and even called me generous before I had said a single word. I told her straight that I wasn't giving anyone my house, and Rachel's face changed immediately. She said I was being selfish for keeping a family home to myself when I could just go back to renting like someone my age without children should be doing. Hearing that from a 26-year-old who was still living in her boyfriend's mom's basement made the whole thing even more ridiculous, but no one at the table defended me. My Uncle Tom said families should share. My mom said I should at least think about it since I could eventually afford something else. My dad stayed quiet, which in his case usually meant agreement. The rest of that dinner was uncomfortable because Rachel just kept talking like the house was already hers. She described turning my office into a nursery, repainting the walls because she didn't like my style, and rearranging everything to suit her taste. She wasn't even asking, she was planning. After dinner, she pulled me aside and told me she had already told Brian's family that I was giving them the house, so I couldn't back out without making her look like a liar. She said his parents were impressed by how generous her family was and that she had been talking about it for weeks. I told her that was her problem for lying, but she started crying and said I was ruining her wedding before it even started. After that, she just acted like everything was settled. She brought Brian over to my house without asking to measure rooms, talked about furniture placement, and even had mail sent to my address like she was already living there. She told my neighbors she'd be moving in after the wedding and asked them about local rules. Brian's parents even contacted me, thanking me for my generosity and asking questions about the property like it already belonged to them. That's when I realized she had fully convinced everyone this was real. The breaking point came when she sent a realtor to me to handle the transfer. The realtor, Diana, called me confused because Rachel hadn't provided any proof that I agreed to anything. That gave me an idea. I told her I'd bring the documents to Rachel's wedding planning party. Rachel had made it a big event with both families there, and when I arrived with a folder, she looked so excited like she had already won. Everyone was thanking me before I even spoke. When it was time, I handed the deed to Diana, and she immediately said there were no transfer documents. I calmly explained that the deed showed the house belonged only to me and that I had never agreed to give it away. The room went completely silent. Rachel tried to say I brought the wrong paperwork, but her voice was shaking. Then I showed the text messages where she admitted she told everyone about the house without my permission. Brian read them himself, and I watched his face change. He asked her directly when I agreed, and she tried to say it happened at Thanksgiving, but I reminded him everyone there heard me say no. Other relatives backed me up. Rachel started changing her story, saying she misunderstood, but Brian's parents made it clear she had told them something very specific. His grandmother even said Rachel promised her a room in the house. At that point, Brian had enough. He stood up and told Rachel they were leaving. She begged him to stay, but he walked out anyway. His family followed, apologizing to me on their way out. Rachel was left crying while her mom comforted her, still acting like I was the problem. I told Rachel I cared about her, but I would never give up something I worked 10 years for just because she lied to everyone. And for the first time since all of this started, I didn't feel unsure. I felt completely certain. After that party, everything went quiet in a way that felt heavy. I didn't hear from Rachel directly, but my phone started blowing up with messages from Aunt Helen. The first one said I had humiliated her daughter in front of Brian's entire family. The next one said I had ruined a young couple's future because I was too selfish to help. By the 5th message, she was calling me heartless and saying I had destroyed Rachel's chance at happiness. I realized quickly that there was no conversation to be had there, just blame being thrown at me over and over, so I blocked her number. A few weeks later, my mom called to tell me Brian had officially ended the engagement. She said Rachel was back at home, barely eating, barely talking, completely devastated. I did feel a little sad hearing that because breakups are painful no matter what caused them, but at the same time, I knew that relationship was built on lies from the start. Even if the house situation hadn't exposed everything, something else would have. Not long after that, other family members started reaching out. My cousin Jacqueline called and said she had been thinking about everything and was honestly shocked by what Rachel tried to do. She apologized for not speaking up at Thanksgiving and said she should have defended me. That meant more than I expected because we weren't even that close, but it made me feel less alone. A few others also reached out, some apologizing for staying quiet, others admitting they were uncomfortable but didn't know how to step in. Slowly, I started to realize I wasn't the problem here. I was just the first person to say no out loud. One weekend, I decided to change all the locks in my house. It felt extreme at first, but then I remembered everything Rachel had already done. She had sent mail to my address, told neighbors she was moving in, and brought Brian over without permission like she already owned the place. I couldn't ignore that. After changing the locks, I went a step further and had security cameras installed at my front door, back door, and garage. That night, I sat on my couch watching the camera feed on my phone, and even though it felt a bit sad that I had to do that because of family, it also made me feel safer. The next day, my mom asked if we could meet for lunch. I almost said no because I was still hurt she didn't defend me earlier, but I agreed anyway. When we sat down, she didn't wait long before apologizing. She said she had been shocked at Thanksgiving and went into her usual habit of trying to keep the peace instead of standing up for what was right. She admitted that some situations don't need peace, they need boundaries, and she should have said something immediately. Hearing her say that honestly meant a lot to me. She even said her silence might have made Rachel feel like she could keep pushing the lie further. I told her I accepted her apology, but I also made it clear that going forward, I needed her to support me openly instead of staying neutral. She agreed right away. We talked for hours, and for the first time since everything happened, it felt like we were actually rebuilding our relationship. About a month later, I had to attend a family funeral. I knew Rachel would be there, and I didn't know how it would go. When I walked in, I saw her sitting at the front with Aunt Helen. She didn't even look at me once the entire time. Helen, on the other hand, made sure to send me cold looks whenever I walked by. Uncle Tom was there too, and when we made eye contact, he gave me a small nod. It wasn't warm, but it wasn't hostile either. It felt like quiet acknowledgement that things had gone too far. After the service, my dad's brother pulled me aside and told me he believed I handled everything correctly. He said Rachel needed to face consequences and that sometimes family members have to be held accountable, even when it's uncomfortable. Hearing that from him helped more than I expected. It made me feel validated in a way I hadn't fully felt yet. After that, I started rebuilding connections with the relatives who had supported me or apologized. I met Jacqueline for coffee. I accepted invitations again. I slowly created a smaller circle of family that actually respected boundaries. At the same time, I accepted that things with Rachel, Helen, and Tom would probably never go back to how they were. Helen still refused to speak to me. Tom stayed polite but distant. Rachel avoided me completely. It hurt, but I understood it was necessary. I couldn't keep people in my life who thought it was okay to try and take my home. At one point, my mom mentioned that Helen was struggling financially, and that it might explain why she pushed so hard for Rachel to get a house. I did feel a bit of sympathy hearing that, but it didn't change anything for me. Financial struggles don't give someone the right to take what isn't theirs. A lot of people struggle and still respect boundaries. I told my mom that I understood, but it didn't excuse what happened. 2 months later, I ran into Brian at the grocery store. It was awkward at first, but we ended up talking for a few minutes. He thanked me for being honest, even though it was hard at the time. He said he was doing better and focusing on himself. I told him I was glad, and I meant it. After a short conversation, we went our separate ways, and I felt a strange sense of closure from that moment. Not long after that, my mom told me Rachel had moved to another state for a new job. She said Rachel wanted a fresh start away from everything. I understood that, but part of me also felt like she was running from the consequences of what she did. Still, I didn't focus on it too much. I had my own life to live. Family gatherings slowly became easier after that. The tension faded. The same people who once pressured me about my house stopped bringing it up completely. It was like an unspoken agreement had formed. No one questioned my ownership anymore. My dad also started making more effort with me. At one family cookout, when someone tried to bring up the situation, he shut it down immediately and said it wasn't something we were discussing. Later, he told me he was proud of me for standing my ground. Hearing that from him meant more than I expected. It felt like everything was finally starting to settle. A few weeks after things started calming down, I began hearing small updates about Rachel through other relatives. Nothing direct, just bits of information passed around. Apparently, she had settled into her new city and found a decent job at a marketing firm. She was making new friends and starting over. Part of me was glad she wasn't completely falling apart, but at the same time, I knew I didn't want any connection with her anymore. Some things you just don't come back from, and trying to take someone's home through lies was one of them. About 5 months after everything happened, I got an email from Aunt Helen. The subject line said, "Thinking of you," which already felt strange. I opened it expecting either blame or a full apology, but it was somewhere in the middle. She said the situation had been complicated and that she wished things had gone differently. She didn't actually say sorry, and she didn't admit Rachel was wrong. She didn't mention the lies or the pressure or anything specific, but the tone was softer than before, like she knew things had gone badly, but couldn't fully admit why. I read it a few times, trying to decide how to respond. In the end, I kept it simple. I replied politely, thanked her for reaching out, and left it at that. No invitation to meet, no attempt to fix things, just distance with respect. It felt like the right choice because not every relationship needs to go back to what it was. Some are better left where they are. When Thanksgiving came around again, my parents invited me over. This time, I asked directly if Rachel and her parents would be there. I wasn't going to walk into another situation blindly. My mom told me they were doing separate celebrations to avoid tension. She didn't try to make me feel guilty or tell me to just get over it. She was honest, and I appreciated that. It showed me she had actually learned from everything that happened. Thanksgiving that year felt completely different. Calm, normal. The people there treated my house like it was obviously mine, not something that needed to be shared or explained. Some even asked about updates I had made, like it was a regular conversation. Sitting there, I realized I wasn't carrying that guilt anymore. I wasn't wondering if I had been too harsh. I knew I had done the right thing. Not long after that, I got promoted at work. It was something I had been working toward for a long time, and it came with a good raise. I decided to celebrate by finally renovating my home office. The same room Rachel had planned to turn into a nursery became something completely mine. I added bookshelves, bought a new desk, and painted the walls a deep color I had always liked. Every time I walked into that room, I felt proud. Not just of the space, but of the fact that I had protected it. My mom came over to see the finished office and stood there for a moment just looking around. She told me it looked amazing and said she was proud of me again. Then, she casually mentioned that Helen had asked about me. I told her I was okay with being civil, but nothing more than that. I wasn't interested in pretending everything was fine. My mom understood, and that was enough. At another family wedding, I saw Helen and Tom again. This time, I walked over and said hello. It wasn't warm, but it wasn't tense either, just polite. We exchanged a few words and then went our separate ways. It felt like the right distance. No pretending, no conflict, just neutral. Later during that event, some of my younger cousins came up to me asking for advice about saving money and buying a house. One turned into 2, then 3, and suddenly I was explaining budgeting, deposits, and planning. They weren't judging me for keeping my house. They were learning from me. One of them even said that watching me stand my ground made her feel like she could do the same one day. That moment stayed with me because it reminded me that setting boundaries doesn't just protect you, it shows others what's possible too. That same night, my dad pulled me aside and told me again how proud he was of me. He admitted he should have spoken up sooner, but he said watching me handle everything taught him something about standing firm. Hearing that meant a lot. It felt like everything had finally settled into place. 7 months after everything started, I woke up one morning in my house and felt completely at peace. The situation with Rachel wasn't something I carried anymore. It had become a memory instead of a weight. I had rebuilt the relationships that mattered, let go of the ones that didn't, and created a life that felt stable again. I made coffee that morning and stood in my kitchen for a second, just looking around. Everything in that space was mine. Not given, not shared, not taken. Earned. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the need to explain that to anyone.